in. And I think we'll go ahead and get started here. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Colin Schaefer. I'm the Managing Director of Galleries at JCC. And I'm joined by Drs. Philippe Palmer and Jill Stahlmann, who are co-curators of the exhibition Stirring the Pot, Bringing the Wanamaker Photos Home. And that's currently on view at the Center Gallery at our Cattaraugus County campus. We're also joined by three other panel members that will introduce themselves after we hear from Philippe and Joe as they discuss the exhibition, how it was conceived, its origins and goals. Just a couple of housekeeping things before they get started. First, I'd like to thank the Director of Campus Life, Lisa Johan, for collaborating with us on this event, and Tammy Kiesler for helping with the technology. And I'd like to thank College Programming Committee and the JCC FSA for their financial support of all of our gallery programming. So now I'd ask everybody to please, except our panelists, to please mute your Zoom links. And if you have any questions for the panel, please post them to the chat and we'll address them at the end of the discussion if there's time enough. And please note, we are recording this and we'll be posting it to our website for those who are unable to attend today. So thanks again for joining us. And Philippe and Joe, if you'd like to go ahead, introduce yourselves, then we'll go ahead and get started.
Go ahead, Dr. Palmer.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen. My name is Dr. Philippe Palmer, and I am the co-curator and photographer of the Stirring the Pot exhibit. And with that said, I'm going to, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So as Joe and I do the introduction, I'm just going to kind of run through this PowerPoint, just kind of go through. So those of you who are unable to attend and see the actual photos, you can get a taste of what we did and what's on display right now. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Yeah, wait, Philippe. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jill Stahlmann. I am a Tuscarora descent from Lewiston, New York. I say descent because my father was enrolled with a clan and my mother is a German American from the Falls. So as a result, I call myself a descendant. Just a little bit about myself and how I came to this project. I have my entire life, I've been interested in Haudenosaunee and Native American subject matter. And that goes from basic culture to identity politics to archaeology to issues of sovereignty and so on. And so out through my journey in life, wherever I land, if it's at an institution or some kind of a repository, one of the things that I do is search through their repositories, their databases, their collections, and I'm always looking for Tuscarora related materials. After I look for Tuscarora related materials, I search for Haudenosaunee. And those are my primary research areas. And so when I got to Indiana University for my PhD program in sociocultural anthropology, the first thing I did was go through their library and museum. And going through their photo database, I quickly came across a photo of my great-great-grandfather, Chief Jefferson Chew. This is my great-great-grandfather. So normally when I'm in a crowd of people that who happen to be indigenous, I will relate myself with my lineage, and I usually stop at Chief Chew. So I go from me to my father, to my grandparents, to my great-grandparents, to my great-grandparents, and I stopped here with Chief Chu. So I'm really surprised to find this in Indiana. Who would ever think they would find their great-great-grandfather in a photo archive in Indiana? And so when I found him, I started looking up other Tuscarora, and I found 6 photos. And I started sharing these with the folks at Tuscarora, and to my amazement, none of the folks there had ever seen any of these pictures. And actually, the one photo of my great-grandfather was the first time that anyone in my family had seen a picture of him.
For a tax write-off or something, so they just give return.
You guys put that on mute, please. All right. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. And so I started showing these pictures to relatives and other people on Tuscarora, and everybody was amazed. And I didn't know what to do with them, with these images, for a very long time, until Philippe and I, we came up with an idea one day, and it was to simply allow people to take photos with their descendants and how they see fit. And it actually turned out to be a pretty good idea. And as simple as this seems, and as simple as these photos are, these are really acts of decolonization. Because what a lot of people don't realize is, I'm going to have Philippe explain the photos and the creators in a minute, but in a more larger case here in America, there was an idea that the native person was going to become extinct. And so the 19th century became a collection expedition for social scientists to collect everything and anything that they could on the native people, because the thought was that they were going to become extinct. Well, as a result, along the way, when they're doing these collection expeditions, they would also have their subjects dress up in stereotypical clothes that they believed that the American audience wanted to see, and that would be native people in traditional regalia. And so one of the most interesting things about the Tuscarora photos and the Haudenosaunee photos is that most of the people who dressed up for the Wanamaker photos back in 1914, they dressed up in their Sunday's best, meaning they were with suits, jackets, ties, nice dresses. And if you look at all of these photos, they're dressed to the tens, really. And I think, and this was actually one of the first stops of this expedition of photography. And I think from this point on, they really wanted their subjects to dress more how America thought Indigenous people dressed. However, for us, these are moments where we get to speak back to these collections. And as you look through all of these images, each one of the people in these photos are speaking back to how we have been betrayed over time. So right now, I'll pass this over to Philippe, and she will talk about the Wanamakers and how this expedition came into being.
Okay. So for those of you who might not know who Wanamaker is, John Wanamaker was kind of an industrialist. He set up department stores, kind of like Macy's or JCPenney or Sears. And there is a big Wanamaker department store that is now the largest Macy's in Philadelphia. There was also one in New York City, and I believe there were others. Anyway, like some of you might know, the department store Sears, they used to have a photo place where you could do photographs. Well, Wanamaker had a similar thing. And so he encouraged or got his photographer, Joseph Dixon, to go out on a salvage project to take photographs of Native Americans all across the country. So like Dr. Stahlmann said, one of the first stops was Haudenosaunee territory. And so, and Tuscarora. So in 1913, they took the 6 images of the Tuscarora people. They also took, Joseph Dixon and his expedition took pictures of Seneca and Mohawk. So I'm not actually sure how many nations were covered. Maybe Dr. Stahlmann.
About 171 territories were visited in a 2-year period.
And so 8,000 photographs were collected during this expedition of various Native groups. Those original images and I believe the negatives ended up at Indiana University, and that is how Joe ended up finding his great-great-grandfather. With that said, not only was John Wanamaker and Joseph Dixon on a salvage kind of expedition to capture natives in a specific point in time, but they also were on an expedition to create something that was marketable and saleable. And because there was this romantic idea of natives in the larger American society, they also sold these images as postcards. So you could pick it up for, I don't know how much in the early 1900s, a penny? That sounds right. But it became a commerce thing too. And to continue, this idea of natives in the larger scheme of things and as commerce. So when Joe and I discussed this project, or kind of embarking on a project like this, we had just come back from doing field work at my site in South Africa, where my mom is South African. So we went there to look at identity formation over there amongst mixed race people. And we incorporated in my research visual anthropology. So we had a lot of photography, and we set up like 3 different photo exhibits of this, of the research that was done, and the visual representations that came out unpacking mixed race identity in South Africa. So when we came back and we're living on Tuscarora in 2012, we kind of sparked this idea of like, hey, let's take those Wanamaker photos and let's, actually have people pose with those images in the way they want to, in the places they want to, in the poses they want to, and let's really take back these images, right? Let's bring them home, and let's make it be an act of digital repatriation, and that's what kind of we coined it. And so beginning in 2013, we started the discussion, and it's been kind of going on since today because we're still here. The exhibit is up and we're still having these conversations. And we've been kind of taking it around and having these discussions on what does representation mean? What does decolonization mean? Who gets to, have a voice of who gets seen, who doesn't get seen, what images get seen. And so, yeah, we decided let's do it here in Seneca land and at JCC. So I thank you, Colin, for allowing us this opportunity. And I thank the panelists for joining us in this conversation. And thank you for everyone who has come to listen to us and to ask questions.
Thanks, Salif, and thank you, Joe. I would encourage everyone to go check out the exhibition, which is at the Center Gallery. And if you can get there in person, please do. That's at our Cat County campus. So now I'd like to ask each of the remaining panelists to introduce themselves, and after which I'll pose some questions to get the discussion started off. So whoever wants to go first.
I'll start if that's okay.
Thanks, Letitia.
Tre ysgennahet Laticia McNaughton Giata, Gwarina Gisasat, Disna, Kanien'kehá Diwaga Snutna. My name is Laticia McNaughton. Hi everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Thanks for having me here today. I'm really honored to be a panelist as part of this conversation about this amazing exhibit. So my name is Laticia McNaughton. I said that my clan is a Wolf Clan, and I'm of the Mohawk Nation. But I also grew up at the Tuscarora Nation community. That's where I'm from and where I was raised. And so I have family connection there. And so yeah, there's I didn't realize that I wasn't part of this initial exhibit or this initial photography project at all. But my aunt, two of my aunts were, so there is a family connection there. So yes, so my name is Letitia. I'm Mohawk Nation. I'm a PhD candidate at University at Buffalo, completing my dissertation on Indigenous and Haudenosaunee food sovereignty. And I will be a clinical assistant professor at University at Buffalo this coming fall. So my research has been about Haudenosaunee food sovereignty, looking into ways that we can revitalize our food traditions, decolonize our diet and health, and also culture as well, and sovereignty. So I do that alongside language. I'm a fluent Mohawk speaker and currently learning Tuscarora language as well. And I'm an artist. I like to create and make different works in different mediums, but primarily I'm into photography. I'm a photographer. And I have been for about 8 years, but I would say ever since I got a camera in my hand. So I'm constantly creating different work, portraitry, product photos, commercial photos, cultural photos, just any sort of nature, any sort of way that I can kind of capture that creativity. So because of that, I'm really excited to be discussing this today and to be able to contribute any sort of insight that I can. So Yama for having me.
Thanks, Letitia.
Just start? Yeah. Okay. My name is Carson Waterman. I'm a member of the Seneca Nation from the Snipe Clan. I was born on the Cattaraugus territory, and around when I turned 5 years old, I was put in a Thomas Indian school, which was there at the Cattaraugus territory. And I was there till age 13, 14. And then I was able to get out of there. I went to Gaënö Central High School. And during all this time, I excelled in artwork. I was exposed to drawing and mostly working with crayons and coloring and so on at the Thomas Indian School. And I became very involved and interested in it. So I continued through high school and finished high school at Gaënö, and then went to a small art school in Cleveland, Ohio. And one of the questions that still has an impact on me today, the question was, what is art? And one of the answers that I saw and heard at that time was art can be self-expression. So this is basically what I base all my work on. I thought that's the best, my answer to what is art. And so I looked at myself, who I am, and then I began doing artwork related to Seneca people and Haudenosaunee, and through art school, I learned painting techniques, drawing, and really developed my skills there. And I also during that time I excelled in art in high school, and I thought I was pretty hot stuff until I got to art school, and then I saw all these other wonderful works, and I thought those were professional people, but they were other art students. That woke me up, and so I really focused on the art. One of the things that I want to mention that it did for me was I was drafted for Vietnam in 1968, and I took some drawings with me, hoping that I could show the military people what I'm capable of, and maybe I'd get lucky and get an art job. Well, of course, that didn't happen. They sent us to Vietnam. And so I did drawings while I could, while I had downtime and was able to. And I kind of filled up a sketch pad that while the other guys were writing letters, I'd write a real quick letter and then I'd do sketches in my sketch pad. And then the right person, the right officer saw my drawings, and he took them through the ranks, and the division commander, General Pepke, the 4th Infantry Division, saw my work, and he said, "I don't care what this man is doing. I want him back working back here with me, working with the division." So that's why I was given a special orders, as the title was a combat artist, and I was attached to the Public Information Office. I didn't have to go out into combat anymore because I had already been there for like 7 years, 7 months. So I like to mention that this skill that I learned with art has basically saved my butt, because it kept me out of the fighting, out of the combat. So then I returned back after Vietnam. I returned back to, went back to school in Cleveland, and I began teaching at the Cuyahoga Community College and the Cleveland Museum of Art, and also the Cooper School of Art, where I began. And I worked there till I think the early 70s. I think it might have been 1974. My brother and his girlfriend came to visit me, and the Seneca Nation was beginning its education program. And they suggested that I come home and work with the Seneca Nation education program. I didn't hesitate. And I called my boss. I told him I'm not coming in Monday. I packed up all my stuff and I came home that weekend and worked with our education program. This was on the Cattaraugus territory at the time. And during that year that I did homeschool coordinating and so on with our Native students, we developed an art organization. It was just a small group. And we did some really nice works, and we began showing our results at our council sessions with the Seneca Nation. They saw the artwork and they were very impressed with what our group was doing. So they said, now it's time to build our museum. They had a museum planned, and then they decided to build, and they built it in Salamanca. It was called the Seneca Iroquois National Museum. I worked there for about around 13 years. And I got married and had a daughter, and she was about 1 year old. And I decided in 1988, I'm going to go out on my own and start producing artwork and see if I can make a living. And it was very scary. Like I said, my daughter was 1 year old, and I went and did it. I went on to powwows, produced artwork, originals, and then eventually made prints. And I have a huge selection of prints today. Let's see, I continued working there or on my own ever since. And I started a studio in Wanmaker. I don't know how many years ago, maybe 20 years ago or something like that, and produced my artwork there. And it was always having to do with our history and our culture. And I still do that today. Today, I work smaller because I'm not able to stand on my legs very long. So I have to reduce the size of my work, but I still do the artwork. If you Google my name, you'll see some of those images that'll come up on the internet. So anyway, I ended up here. Met with Jill Stahlmann. He invited me. Actually, I invited him to my studio because I was going to donate some easels and large equipment that I couldn't use anymore. And then he suggested that I come to the culture center, which we are now, and work with the culture center, the Onöndowa'ga culture center. And I'm just getting started. I'm still sorting things out, but I'm really liking what's happening. And I'm glad to see other people doing what they do. And I'm looking forward to working with everybody from here on out. Nyawe.
Thank you, Carson. Brett, are you there?
Oi, nyawe Gaënö, Brett Maybee, ni Gasso. Onöndowa'ga Gaënö, haitwa Onöndowa'ga ni Guahe, ayetne songa de kenoits higa. So Onöndowa'ga nenga ni gawanote. Brett Maybee ni Gasso, Onöndowa'ga ni haitwa I ke gachi ni jagaweno ne yawanza geono ne o hawod geono o hawod geono gayoso ne hatnowa ne honu. So ongonyo angiatag na ngani gawanote I haitwa ne aquagia ne hononu. So basically, I introduced myself the best that I could. And I said that my name's Brett Maybee. Perhaps I could say that I'm Turtle Clan and of the Seneca Nation. But however, like Dr. Stahlmann, I am technically considered to be a descendant. But part of the decolonization process also involves decolonizing our identity. And I kind of refuse to call myself a descendant because I think it's inadequate to just oversimplify something like that. I grew up here. My house is here on Seneca Nation territory. I've spent my entire life working on the nation. I'm learning the language. I'm teaching my sons in that way. So, it's just one of those things that to me is not acceptable. And whether anybody likes it or not, that's how I choose to identify myself. So I said if somebody doesn't like that, perhaps I could use these words, that my name is Brett Maybee. I am of the great potato people. And then I started to, the words for hill and potato are very similar. And I went on to say that my wife is from the islands. She's Hawaiian. And so if we're going to use, I guess traditional frameworks to be able to identify ourselves, and technically speaking, if we are, talking maternal lineality and things like that, then, and if I'm married into my wife's family, perhaps we could say that we are Sea Turtle Clan. Because they call the turtle, which is what I explained in my introduction, the honu. And so trying to bypass the English language altogether and to identify myself using our two languages, hono is one of the prefixes for they are. Okay, and if you were to conjugate that according to the rules in Seneca, there are certain various aspects by which the words can be used. So basically what I did is I took they are, and I took the word for honu, which as far as I can tell, we don't have a word for sea turtle, obviously, being so far inland. And the various phonetics, they work. Honu is something that my ancestors here completely could have said. All the sounds are there, right? So basically what I did is I kind of conjugated, I like to have a lot of fun playing with words. And I've been talking with some Oxodes and, some of the elders in the community and just explaining what I just explained to you, that I feel that there are better ways for us to talk about identity in ways that don't exclude a significant portion of the population. And so that's exactly what I did. So needless to say, a lot of my work is involved with that, whether I intentionally try to do that or not. It's just kind of how my brain operates, I guess. I love the language. I love the ways. I love the paradigms. I love the archetypes. I love the walk of life. And so incidentally, I ended up, for the 20 years I've been out of high school, I don't have any fancy credentials or anything like that, but for the 20 years that I've been out of school, I've spent most of that time working for the nation. In fact, 16 and a half out of the 20 years was for the Seneca Nation. And I've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different departments over the years and have gained an incredible amount of cultural knowledge that I feel brings me a little bit of a responsibility to give back to the community. So I started, I guess, as a receptionist, and that was when they were just getting ready to vote for the casino. I worked in payroll, and I left for a couple of years, did accounting when I came back. And then I got into maps and boundaries and did surveying work. And at that time, I really fell in love with the history. But long story short, back in 2015, I hesitantly took a part-time job with the nation's now defunct radio station, 105.9 WGWE. And I did that part-time for a year and a half, and then decided when the opportunity came up that, it's now or never, I might as well do it while the opportunity is there. So I came on full-time. And to me, there was a responsibility that came with that, especially when it came to, using the language. And I still speak baby language. But, even with that being said, I saw a little bit of a responsibility to set some kind of bar. And my hope was that, it was going to, people would hear it and they would feel inspired by it and want to use it more. They would be able to hear the language in a very contemporary setting, like a radio station. And as far as I can tell, that might have been like the first of its kind, which again is kind of decolonizing some of that space, And so needless to say, long story short, I know I'm already taking up too much time. It came to pass that I was given a show to do, which, as my biography explains, I still host, and it got picked up for national syndication. It had one of, if not the best rollouts for a new show on Native Voice One out of Anchorage, Alaska. And the show is called Gaënö. and it is Seneca for music or song, but there's a lot of concepts that kind of tie in with that word as well. And you can get really, really deep with it. And trust me, I do. But when I started doing Gaënö, then I had to start kind of looking around for music that was outside of the library. I wasn't really happy with what we had at the radio station. Not that, I love powwow music, but I just kind of had a feeling there was a lot more. But the problem that I ran into, and I want you to all keep this in mind, is where do you find what's out there for Indigenous music? And, I could probably even ask some of the members of Indigenous nations on this panel, where do you find it, or who do you know? And, sadly enough, I don't think there are a lot of resources. So I set about creating some. And, I didn't really have any funding in the budget. So anyway, I did most of it in my own time, but I created a directory that has about 800 different Native musicians on there with links to their pages, and you can get in on there and you can surf around. And so I've been slowly kind of massaging that, for a lot of reasons. And again, this ties in with what the theme of our discussion is today. That decolonizing process is still ongoing. There's a tendency to discuss these things as if it all happened in some distant past. But the fact of the matter is if we're taking an organization like the Grammys, right, you have to meet their criteria in order to be considered traditional music. So in essence, what that says is you still need to get their approval in order to be acknowledged as Indigenous music. And often they want flute, they want drum. And so in essence, what the message is you stay there and we'll tell you when what it is to be Indigenous and Indigenous music and whatnot. And to this day, I can still talk to a good majority of non-Indigenous people who will tell me, well, there's just no market for it. And that's simply not true. It took until 2021 to get a television show on a major network written by and for Indigenous people. And it's still very much the case for Native American music in all genres: blues, country, jazz, rock, electronic, hip hop. All of those have incredible artists in there. But because we're relegated to a very niche world or new age kind of genre, it's almost non-existent to be able to discover any of that. So long story short, yes, I produce the full show. I also occasionally guest host on another syndicated show that's on closer to 100 stations, and that's a live call-in show on the same network. And my biggest project lately has been this Full Moon Radio, which is I have about 5,000 songs in the library, and it's tied in with the Native Artist Directory. And you can get on the site and it's streaming Indigenous music 24/7. So this is a lot of the work that I'm about. And in addition to being a father of children who have or are currently attending the Onöndowa'ga, the Faith Keeper School up in Onöndowa'ga. And so, needless to say, the convergence of all these paths is kind of, where the majority of my work lies. As a father, as an artist, as a community member, it is really trying to create immersive atmospheres by which my children can see themselves represented. And maybe a good example for that is like Spider-Man. I grew up with Peter Parker. I love Peter Parker, but my boys absolutely love Miles Morales because he looks a little bit more like them. You know what I mean? So I guess that's an easy way for me to kind of try and explain a lot of the work that I'm doing. And I apologize for going way over on my time, but yeah, there you have it.
Okay, thank you, Brett. So one of the goals of the Stirring the Pot exhibition is, as Philippe stated and Joe, is decolonizing a former colonial project. And Brett, you've spoken to this too. It's been come up. So I think there may be some people in our audience today who are actually not familiar with the term decolonization. So can you talk to us about what decolonization is, why it's important, and again, Brett, you've mentioned this, but how the work you do supports decolonization. Directed to anybody at the panel can answer, yeah.
Joe or Letitia, would you guys like to jump in?
I was on mute. Hi again. Well, let me start off by saying I believe we're all colonized. We all have been socialized in certain ways. For some groups of people in this country, it's a little bit different. And so we have been relegated by our races, right? And so these are sociological constructions of grouping people based on the phenotypes that they possess. So white people are over here, indigenous people are here, African Americans are here, Latinos are here, Asians are here. We're all in our categories. And so throughout this colonization process in America, indigenous people were kind of taken away from the main body of that populace. And we were set on a civilization mission where we were to have a new way to dress, new deities to worship, a new educational system. Basically, we're getting reworked. And so throughout the 19th century, simultaneously, indigenous people are being removed from their land bases, traditional land bases, and we're having our cultures removed from us because, as the famous saying from Richard Pratt, to save the person, you kill the Indian. And so part of this process for indigenous folks was to kill our culture, but to save our souls. Tisha, would you like to add on?
So I'm thinking about what Brett had said and thinking about my language journey and how to define decolonization, which is what many of us, scholars and community members and activists and artists have been trying to tackle. And some people even reject the term decolonization. Like, what is there to, why do we need to undo? Why don't we indigenize? Instead, bring life to the ways that are already there, and to not see decolonization as a process of undoing, but rather like renewal of our traditions and our ways and our culture and our history. And I'm thinking about what Brett had mentioned earlier in his introduction. I'm thinking about language. Because for me, language, it's all just so holistic and comprehensive, all of it. You can't just pick one single thing out and say, I'm going to decolonize my food, because it's all very much connected. So, I started with looking at food traditions, and it became apparent that this process of decolonization or indigenizing is a lot more holistic and involves so many different components. And language is a huge one. So a few years ago, I completed Kanien'kehá Mohawk language immersion, 8 months of full-time study to become intermediate fluent. And it was really like, that to me just truly felt like decolonization, because it was like undoing the wiring of English and a totally different way of thinking in your brain. Just thinking of different concepts, the concepts of time and space and needing context, and how things are based on our relational aspect, our relationship to each other and to each other's people. So yeah, decolonization, I'd say it's like a rematriation or a returning to ourselves in some way. And everybody is on their own journeys into figuring out what that is and what that means. and it may look different for different people. But for me, it's been kind of returning to myself through language, through food, through culture, through indigenous knowledge, through the connection to creation and nature, and just there's a, I don't know if you can see it, but right about here, there's a little like photo piece that a graphic artist friend had made, and it says exist, resist, indigenize, and decolonize. So I thought that was really relevant for today's discussion. But I don't want to take up too much time, so I don't know if Carson had anything to add.
Carson, what, did you have anything to contribute to that, to her question, to her point?
There's a lot of things that are going through my mind. There was a piece of artwork that I was going to bring with me, and I forgot. It's downstairs, but I wanted to show this piece of artwork that I did in Vietnam. Just very quickly show, but it's about one of our soldiers who was a officer. He was a team leader, and he was a black man, and he was working with a mountain yard team leader. And the drawing shows the two together, and the black guy he was out in the jungle, so he wasn't clean shaven, and none of us were. And so he had like a goatee and a mustache, and he was wearing his special forces beret, a green beret. So this is how I sketched him. I wish I'd brought that with me and I could show you. But why I'm talking about this is that when I had done the artwork, I was at this time attached to the Public Information Office, and this officer had this drawing, and he had on his desk, he called me into his office and he pointed at the black soldier. He said, "This man looks like a Black Panther." And I said, "Sir, this is what he looked like. He's a Green Beret Special Forces officer." He said, "He looks like a Black Panther, and if you do any more work like this, I'm going to send your ass back out into the boonies." And why I'm telling you this is that he was a racist officer and had no regard for the accomplishments and the value of what these men were doing. And so I kind of missed that part when I was talking before, so I just wanted to catch you back up with that. What I wanted to express about our conditions back in 1965 in Vietnam. There was racism going on there, and to fast forward to today, we have this divided country, which is racist on one side, and the other side, and it reminds me that maybe we're living what it was like when the Civil War happened in 18 whatever it was, when you had two sides fighting and arguing with each other. And I watched the news a little bit this morning, and it's still going on. It's not not changing. And so I missed that opportunity to bring that drawing with me to show you, and I apologize for that. I got distracted a bit, but that's what I want to talk about and mention is the problems we have in this country of we have to somehow figure out how to get along with each other, and every opportunity we can, we should try to promote and to have discussions about this. So I'm feeling a little better now that I was able to bring that back up, because I had forgot about it. I didn't include it the first time I spoke. So I want to thank you again for having me here and for listening to what I had to say. And we need to keep on going. Meow.
You're my person. I would like to add on to what everyone has been saying. Colonization is a process, right? And so for me, I had to come to terms with what that meant. And so for me, when I found myself pulled to this idea of freeing myself of the bondage that wasn't voluntarily placed on me, I thought I had to reject everything that was European or non-Indigenous. And it doesn't actually have to be that way. It's a process of sloughing off the ideologies or the worldviews that doesn't match your community's values and ethics, and how your community situates themselves within the world. Once I realized what decolonization meant for me, I was able to still enjoy those things that I thought I previously had to give up, like, I don't know, Slayer or Metallica or something. And I quickly learned that I could still enjoy those things, but still free my mind from that imprisonment that I was in. And it is a process. As we are colonized, decolonization is also a process. And it's ongoing, and it's going to be lifelong. I just wanted to add that one part.
And I would just like to piggyback off of that. So listening to what everybody has said, from Brett and Joe actually talking about how they are descendants. So that leads to a colonization process of like who can be what based on your parentage, right? And based on a science that is based on racism. I am of mixed race, technically. My mother is colored. That is the term that was put on her and her family in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa. What that means is she is mixed race. So she is of African, South Asian, and European descent. My father, she immigrated here to the United States. She's caramel complexion. She, I guess, passes as Black, but she doesn't have the same historical experiences as African Americans. She married my father. My father was a white man, German Sicilian. I look like him with the same coloring. I have been to Africa many, many times, or South Africa rather, because Africa is a giant place. It is not a monolithic place. However, and like how Joe said, he used to reject everything European. To a certain extent, I did the same thing, and I wanted everything like Afrocentric or South Asian, or even I looked to indigenous cultures here to seek inspiration. But in so doing, I realized I was being, well, racist, first of all. And then it's also hard being a person that, you know, like is very light skinned and passes as white to, you know, be very Afrocentric or whatever, because then people are like, hey, what are you? And I've gotten that question so many times. But once, I really like what Letitia said about decolonizing. There's another way to look at it. What about indigenizing? And actually, when I got to Indiana University and started doing my research, I originally was going to do research in China. And then I'm like, no, I'm going to go home to South Africa, and I'm going to look at and unpack what it means to be colored, and what is this identity, and what does it mean, you know, like, how are they not indigenous? So in a way, I was like kind of indigenizing this group of people that were kind of in the middle and kind of liminal. And it allowed me to be much more, I guess, embracing of like human beings, and a little less racist, I would say, because like Joe said, we're all kind of colonized, and it is a process, and decolonization of our own selves is a process, and indigenizing also is also a process. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's part of the work that I try to do within the classroom. And I'm so happy to be able to be a part of bringing this panel together and to have all of y'all be here. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Carson, Joe, Philippe. Looks like we're getting short on time. I did have a few more questions, but I'm just going to throw this last one out here, skip ahead, and so I think this might be in kind of a way to wrap this up. What roles and responsibilities do you feel that non-Indigenous people have in decolonization? To anybody out in the panel.
Yeah, I like to talk about this specifically because there's a lot of misconception, and I can actually piggyback a little bit off of what Carson said. You know, that a lot of people are fighting, and we see people at odds. And one of the common arguments is, why can't everybody just be a regular old American? And my question always back to the people who ask me that is, well, what does that mean? Because you have to be very careful how you say that, because once you impose what you think that should be on everybody else, that's perpetuating said colonization. You know, I had a neighbor, in fact, who straight up said that, and I asked him, well, what does that mean? Well, everybody should just be good old regular God-fearing, you know, beer drinking Americans. And well, that's not how I choose to live the American experience. And it's not up to anybody else to define that. And I think that's kind of a big thing, is to not impose what you think, the non-Indigenous person, what they think it means to be whatever, X, Y, Z, you know what I mean? And I think that's it. And the other thing that I think is super, super important, and I hear this rhetoric a lot, from my white friends and sometimes family too, is, well, I'm not racist. The problem with the system that we have is it's set up where it's almost said with a wink. I'm not racist, but so-and-so over here is, and they'll do the dirty work. So what we need is people to be less passive about the racism in this country. If you're not racist, that's great. Then do something about those that do, because that's the problem. All they need is your complacency. All they need is for you to say, that's not me, I'm not racist, therefore this is not my argument. And in just being passive about it and not engaging in these conversations, it doesn't do anything to solve it. In fact, it only enables them to be able to enact legislation and things like that. And I think it is also important to understand that there is a difference between bigotry and racism. Anybody can be a bigot. Racists are those who make legislation, make policy based off bigotry. So it is the institutionalizing of bigoted worldviews. So that's my only real encouragement, is to not just be passive about it, but to engage and to say, we've come way too far to let it all go to shit. We need to, in fact, buckle down and make sure that the work that we've been about for, you know, the undoing of the racist system over the last 50, 60 years, to not doing anything about it now is going to be the very linchpin that allows for fascism to take back over. And then that process repeats. And then who are they coming after? You know what I mean? So I guess my point is don't be afraid to engage. And it's not enough to just say, I'm not a racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to actively fight against it, or else it's not gonna get any better.
Colin, can I say something?
Sure.
Brett's absolutely right. So in my job, I have a lot of public view on me sometimes. And I find myself, I am still carrying on the same conversations that my elders like Carson have been doing for 50 years. I'm carrying on the same conversations. I'm basically giving the same talks. And that's the part that I find a little problematic, Brett, is we have 7 open campaigns across the country right now where we have people running for office who are openly white nationalist. And that tells me we have not made very much ground. And I also feel like we're not making much ground if I'm giving the same talks over and over that Carson's been making since 1970. Or the same director of the museum made in 1977. I was really shocked that I thought I came up with something original. I gave a public talk only to find out 6 months later that the former director, George Abrams, gave a talk similar in 1977. And it just tells me that our allies also have to pick up this load a little bit, because it just can't be us all the time giving the same talks. Brett is absolutely right. We need people who are more open, who will be more vocal in these moments. And I have to say, I am a little worried that we are on a pendulum swing towards the right, and we have to remain vigilant. Thanks, Brett. You really dislodged a thought I had there.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you all. We really are out of time. But a big thanks to all the panelists for this engaging and informative discussion. And thank you everybody who came out to join us today. I hope that you all enjoyed the discussion and that you're able to take something away from it. And again, I'll encourage you to visit the Stirring the Pot exhibition at the Center Gallery on our JCC's Cattaraugus County campus. And we will be posting this recording to the website. So thanks so much, everybody.
Colin, one last thing.
Yes.
Person located the image and he would like to show it real quick. Is that fine?
Sure, sure.
Okay. So yes, he does look like a Black Panther, but he's a Green Beret American,
Right.
Fighting for the United States.
Right. Thank you. So, thanks, Carson.
Yeah. The point is, he didn't need to bring that out. You know, it was his racist. That was 50 years ago.
Thank you.